Maple Street was the kind of neighborhood that looked perfect on the outside. Manicured lawns, pastel-painted fences, and porch flags fluttering neatly in the wind. But underneath that suburban calm, people whispered, judged, and watched each other's lives like episodes on a screen. Karen Wilcox was one of those watchers. A woman in her early 50s, always impeccably dressed, always with something to say about someone. She prided herself on keeping her street the way she liked it, quiet, clean, and predictable. So when the new neighbor moved into the small brick house across the road, she noticed immediately. He was tall, fit, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen real work. His name, according to the mail she'd seen the movers drop, was Marcus Hill. And the first thing she saw him do after moving in wasn't unpack boxes or greet the neighbors. It was wash his old red pickup truck in the driveway, a hose in one hand and a smile on his face. Karen stood on her porch, arms crossed. Just what we needed, she muttered under her breath. Another one of those types with a noisy truck. Her friend Linda, who lived 2 doors down, leaned on the fence. You mean the firefighter? I heard he works at Station 17 downtown. Karen scoffed. Firefighter or not, he could at least keep to himself. Some people bring their whole city attitude to the suburbs. I like peace, not sirens. Linda gave her a look. Karen, he literally saves people's lives. Karen waved it off. That's his job. Doesn't make him special. That afternoon, Marcus walked across the street, holding a small tray of cupcakes. Afternoon, ma'am, he said with a friendly smile. Name's Marcus. Just moved in. Thought I'd introduce myself. Karen looked him up and down, his dark skin glistening slightly in the sun, his arms still marked faintly with healed burn scars. Oh, she said curtly, you're the new neighbor. How nice. He extended the tray. My niece baked these. Wanted me to share with the neighbors. She hesitated, then forced a thin smile. Well, that's thoughtful. Though we don't usually eat much sugar around here. Marcus chuckled lightly. Understood. Maybe just pass them on to someone who does. She took the tray, her fingers brushing his for a brief second, before she stepped back quickly, almost reflexively. Well, welcome to Maple Street, she said, voice tight. I do hope you keep things quiet. Marcus's smile didn't fade, but something in his eyes shifted. I'll do my best, ma'am. You take care now. As he turned to leave, she muttered just loud enough for him to hear. Can't believe they let anyone move in these days. Marcus paused for half a heartbeat, then simply nodded and walked away. Over the next few weeks, Karen made it a point to find fault in everything Marcus did. His truck was too loud. His nephew played basketball in the driveway. His friends, all fellow firefighters, sometimes came over for a cookout after their shifts. Each time, Karen complained. Once to the neighborhood board, twice to the HOA. But Marcus never raised his voice, never fought back. He just smiled, nodded, and went back to his life. To him, this was nothing new. He'd faced worse, on the job, in the city, even in uniform. Racism didn't surprise him anymore, but it still stung when it came from the people who lived just a few yards away. Sometimes, late at night, he'd glance across the street and see Karen's house glowing with warm yellow light. Her family gathered around the dinner table. He'd smile faintly. He didn't hate her. He just hoped that someday she'd see him as more than a color or a stranger. Because in his line of work, when the fire comes, everyone's equal. And soon, fate would make sure Karen Wilcox learned that truth. In the most terrifying, unforgettable way possible. It was just after midnight when the sound broke through the silence. A faint crackling, soft at first, like wood sighing in the night. Then came the pop of shattering glass, followed by the shrill scream of a smoke alarm. Across the street, Marcus Hill stirred awake. Years of service had trained him to recognize that sound before his mind fully caught up. The pitch, the rhythm, the panic hidden inside the shriek of a detector. He sat up instantly. The red glow through his blinds confirmed it. Fire! He threw on his shoes, grabbed his jacket, and sprinted to the window. The house across the street, Karen Wilcox's house, was alive with flames licking from the kitchen windows, the orange light pulsing like a heartbeat against the dark sky. Dear God, he muttered. Without thinking twice, Marcus bolted out the front door barefoot, the cold pavement biting at his feet. He could already hear the screams, muffled but desperate, from inside the Wilcox home. He ran across the street, his lungs filling with acrid smoke before he even reached the porch. The door handle was burning hot, but he didn't hesitate. He kicked it open with one swift motion. The hallway was a tunnel of smoke. The air was thick, the heat suffocating. Somewhere upstairs, someone was coughing violently. "Fire department!" Marcus shouted instinctively, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Is anyone inside?" A cry answered him. "Up here, please!" It was Karen. Marcus's heart pounded. He couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, but he knew the layout of that house. He'd watched her come and go enough times to memorize it. The stairs were on the left. He wrapped his shirt around his face and charged forward. Every instinct kicked in. Stay low, follow the wall, breathe shallow. His eyes burned, his lungs screamed, but he didn't slow down. Halfway up the stairs, a beam cracked and fell, crashing against the railing. Sparks showered over him, but he pressed on. "Karen, where are you?" "Bedroom," came the hoarse reply. "My kids, they're with me." Marcus reached the second floor. Flames were eating through the wallpaper, the ceiling groaning under the heat. He followed the sound of coughing and pushed through the bedroom door, or what was left of it. Karen was huddled in the corner with her two children, a teenage boy and a little girl, both sobbing, faces streaked with soot. The moment she saw him, that familiar broad-shouldered figure through the haze, her eyes widened in disbelief. You? She stammered. Marcus didn't waste time. "Yes, ma'am. No time for that now. We need to move." He wrapped a blanket around the children, then crouched to their level. "Stay low, hold hands, and follow me. Don't stop for anything, you understand?" They nodded, trembling. He led them through the smoke, guiding them down the stairs one step at a time. The floorboards creaked, threatening to give way. Halfway down, the little girl began to cough violently. "Cover your mouth," he shouted, scooping her into his arms without hesitation. When they reached the front door, the heat was unbearable. Flames had consumed most of the living room. Marcus lowered his shoulder and charged through, shielding the girl with his body as they broke into the cool night air. He stumbled onto the grass, gasping. Behind him, Karen and her son collapsed to the ground, coughing, crying, shaking. The sound of sirens filled the distance, red and blue lights racing closer by the second. Karen looked at him, her face pale and streaked with soot, her voice trembling. You came for us." Marcus coughed, his throat raw. "That's what we do." Her eyes filled with tears. For once, there was no arrogance, no judgment, no fear, only gratitude. As the fire trucks roared onto the street and firefighters poured out, Marcus waved them over. 2 kids, 1 adult, smoke exposure but conscious. "Get them checked now." "Got it, Lieutenant Hill," one of the men shouted, and Karen's head snapped toward him. "Lieutenant?" she repeated softly. Marcus nodded faintly, finally allowing himself to breathe as the adrenaline faded. "Yeah," he said. "Station 17. I told you I like to keep things quiet." Karen stared at him, stunned, as paramedics rushed her children onto stretchers. The man she had mocked, avoided, and complained about had just walked through fire for her family. As the flames devoured what remained of her house, she whispered, her voice breaking, "You saved my babies." Marcus smiled gently, his eyes tired but kind. That's what neighbors are for. The next morning dawned gray and cold, the smell of smoke still clinging to the air over Maple Street. The Wilcox house was gone, a blackened shell of wood and ash, cordoned off by yellow tape. Neighbors gathered in small, hushed groups, whispering about the fire, about the sirens, about the man who had run straight into the flames. Karen Wilcox sat in a borrowed jacket on her sister's porch, watching the ruin of her home across the street. Her hands trembled around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fire again, her children crying, the suffocating smoke, and that moment when the front door burst open and Marcus Hill appeared through the haze like a guardian made of courage and light. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. The memory burned as fiercely as the house itself. When the firefighters had finished containing the blaze, someone told her that Marcus had been taken to St. Helena General Hospital. He had refused treatment on the scene, insisting everyone else be cared for first, but paramedics had finally convinced him to go. He'd inhaled too much smoke, and there were minor burns on his arms and neck. Karen's sister had suggested she rest, but rest wasn't possible, not with guilt sitting like a stone in her chest. By noon, she was in the hospital lobby, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers. Her legs shook as she asked the nurse at the desk, "Marcus Hill, firefighter. He was brought in last night." The nurse smiled warmly. "Room 214, ma'am. He's awake." The walk down the hall felt endless. Her heels clicked against the tile, echoing louder than her heartbeat. When she reached the door, she hesitated, hand hovering over the handle. She wanted to say thank you, but the words felt small, pathetic even, compared to what he'd done. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. Marcus was sitting up in bed, his arm wrapped in clean white bandages, a faint smile on his face as he scrolled through something on his phone. He looked tired but peaceful, like a man who had already moved on from the night before. When he saw her, he blinked in surprise. "Mrs. Wilcox." Karen's throat tightened. I didn't think you'd want to see me." Marcus tilted his head, setting the phone aside. "Why wouldn't I?" She swallowed hard, voice trembling. "Because of how I treated you. Because of the things I said. You had every reason to leave me in that fire." He frowned gently. Ma'am, that's not how it works." Karen stepped closer, gripping the flowers tightly. "But I was awful to you. You know it. And still, you came." Marcus smiled softly. "You're my neighbor. That's all that matters." Her composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. "You saved my children," she whispered. "You saved me. I don't know how to live with that, knowing I treated you like—" He interrupted her, his tone kind but firm. "Like a person you didn't know yet, that's all. You learned something about me. And I learned something about you." Karen blinked through her tears. "What could you possibly have learned from me?" Marcus chuckled quietly. "That people can change when life gives them the right reason to." She sank into the chair beside his bed, covering her face for a moment as the guilt and gratitude tangled inside her. "I don't know if I can ever make it up to you." He looked at her with that calm, steady warmth that seemed to come from someplace deep, the kind of peace only found by people who've seen both the worst and best of humanity. "You don't have to make it up to me," he said softly. "Just pay it forward. Be someone's help when they least expect it." Karen nodded slowly, staring at the flowers in her trembling hands. Then she looked up and met his gaze. Really met it, maybe for the first time. "Marcus," she said quietly, "you didn't just save my family. You saved me. From the person I was." He gave her a small, understanding smile. "Then I'd say the fire wasn't all bad." Karen let out a shaky laugh through her tears. "You're impossible." "And alive," he said with a grin, "which is good enough for me." When she left the hospital that afternoon, the sun had finally broken through the clouds. The air smelled faintly of rain and smoke, but also of something new: forgiveness. Across the street, the ashes of her old home still smoldered, but for the first time, Karen didn't just see loss. She saw a beginning. She made a silent promise then, that the next time she looked at her neighbor, she wouldn't see a color, a background, or a label. She'd see a hero, and she'd never forget his name. 2 weeks later, Maple Street looked different. Not because the houses had changed, but because the people had. Neighbors who once only waved politely now stopped to talk. The smell of ash had faded, replaced by the warm scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. Construction trucks lined the curb where the Wilcox house had stood, and the sound of hammers and saws mixed with laughter instead of gossip. And at the center of it all was Marcus Hill. He was back on his feet, back in uniform, though the bandages on his arm still peeked out beneath the short sleeves of his firefighter's shirt. He'd insisted on returning to duty as soon as the doctors cleared him, saying he felt more restless sitting still than running into a burning building. That afternoon, the community association had arranged a small ceremony. Not official city business, just neighbors coming together to say thank you. The entire street gathered on the Wilcox lawn, where folding chairs were lined up under the open sky. A few kids held handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Mr. Marcus," in colorful letters. Marcus stood off to the side, looking slightly uncomfortable with all the attention. He'd faced roaring flames, collapsing ceilings, and explosions, but standing in front of people clapping for him? That was somehow harder. At the front of the crowd, Karen Wilcox stood at the makeshift podium, holding a sheet of paper that trembled slightly in her hands. Gone were the pearls and stiff posture. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her hair tied back. Her voice shook as she began to speak. 2 weeks ago, she said quietly, I made the biggest mistake a person can make. I judged someone by what I thought I knew instead of who he truly was. The crowd grew still. I was rude, she continued. I was cold. I was unfair. And when the fire came, when my home was burning, when my children were trapped, the person I least deserved help from was the one who saved us. She turned toward Marcus, her eyes brimming with tears. I said things I'm ashamed of. I saw you as different, but now I see what you really are, a hero, a neighbor, and a better human being than I'll ever be. Marcus's throat tightened. He didn't move, didn't speak. He simply watched her, his expression soft. Karen took a deep breath. I can't undo what I said, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to live the way you do, with kindness, courage, and grace. The crowd broke into applause, some people wiping their eyes. Even the kids clapped with shy enthusiasm. Karen stepped aside and motioned to Marcus. Lieutenant Hill, would you like to say something? Marcus hesitated for a moment, then walked up to the podium. His presence was calm, steady, like a flame that warmed rather than burned. I appreciate the kind words, he said, his deep voice carrying across the lawn. But I didn't do anything special. I did what anyone wearing this uniform would have done. Fire doesn't ask who you are. It doesn't care about color or background or what neighborhood you live in. It just takes, unless someone stands in its way. He paused, looking out over the crowd, the same faces that once watched him from behind curtains, unsure what to think of the new black firefighter who moved in next door. But the truth is, he went on, it's not just fire we fight. Sometimes it's fear. It's misunderstanding. It's the walls we build in our minds that keep us apart. The audience was silent now, every word hanging in the cool afternoon air. Marcus smiled faintly, and if what happened that night helped tear down even one of those walls, then maybe it was worth it. A long moment passed. Then the crowd erupted into applause again, louder this time, sincere and powerful. Karen stepped forward, tears streaking her cheeks. She hugged him tightly, whispering, Thank you for saving my family and for saving me from myself. Marcus hugged her back gently. We're all neighbors here, Karen. Always were. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted Maple Street in gold, the crowd lingered, talking, laughing, sharing food and stories. Kids played basketball in Marcus's driveway, just as they always had. Only now, no one complained. Karen's son, still in a cast from the fire, sat on the tailgate of Marcus's red truck, telling anyone who'd listen that Mr. Marcus is the coolest firefighter ever. And across the street, where ashes once smoldered, workers raised the first new wooden beams of the Wilcox home. Karen stood beside Marcus, watching the frame go up. Funny, she said softly, how something can burn to the ground and still build something better. Marcus nodded, hands in his pockets. That's how fire works. It destroys, but it also clears the way for new life. She smiled, eyes warm. I guess we both got rebuilt a little, huh? He chuckled. Yeah, Maple Street too. As the last light of day faded, the street that once divided them now united around something stronger, understanding. And for the first time in her life, Karen Wilcox looked at her neighbor not as a stranger, not as a man to fear, but as the kind of person who reminded the whole world what bravery and grace really looked like.